Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you to Andrew and Mika for inviting me. I actually want to thank a lot of the previous speakers because when I usually go to a conference, my head's in sustainability, right? So I'm thinking about the planet's health, the lack of the health of the planet, issues around water and other stuff we'll talk about. And it's a really good reminder that the issues that we struggle with in sustainability actually are very similar to a lot of the stuff you guys have been talking about today. How do you think about the positive aspects of technology and balance those with the risks and the negative aspects? And I often talk about, and we're going to talk a little bit about wildlife today. Who cares the most about knowing where animals are today? It's probably poachers, right? So when we think about privacy and data and the concepts and the constructs of what I work on, we often struggle with a lot of stuff I've heard today. So I hope you'll indulge me for the next few minutes because you guys have really taken me on a journey in the last day and a half. I'm going to ask you to sort of come with me on a journey on sustainability and talk about how we think about this issue, artificial intelligence and the Anthropocene. Anybody know what the Anthropocene is? Yeah, it's basically a new epoch, if you will, on planetary history where humans are actually altering the planet's health. And so scientists are increasingly referring to the age that we currently live in as basically human-induced planetary impacts. And so I think about every single day, my team and I come to work and we think about how do we empower every person and organization on the planet to thrive in a resource-constrained world? So there's a story that I told myself for a really long time, and I wouldn't be surprised if most of you in the audience tell yourself this story as well. It's hot and getting hotter. Climate change is real, the science is clear, the numbers are staggering, right? I won't date myself, but since I've been alive, there has not been a cooler than normal month on the planet, right? The water crisis is real, it's severe. We saw it here in California, in the US. We see it in multiple states. It's nothing like it is in other countries. The droughts in Africa cause mass famine, and if we think some of the political unrest that's hitting other countries is caused by climate change, lack of food, and drought, it will come here too. And so these are our realities, and this is really easy to start to get negative. You can see we've got a problem with climate, we've got a problem with water, we've got a problem with ice melt. I don't know if anybody saw the Washington Post about a break today, but there's a big chunk in Antarctica the size of Delaware that is now fracturing off the ice shelf. And so when you look at those kinds of things, people don't necessarily know all the data, but the probability of a sea rise of 2 to 3 feet, about the same when you look at the model. There's a big trough in the middle. But if ice comes off the land shelf, then you're talking about 20, 40, 60 feet sea rise. These are big problems. And species are declining, and we need more food and more water than we currently have. And this is our reality. We're at 7 billion people today, growing to 9 to maybe 10. And most of that's in places where people want to actually consume at the same rate that we've been privileged enough to consume at. So how do you actually come to work and say, wow, that's a really negative story, right? We've got all these problems on a massive scale. How are we actually going to tackle this? So I look at the other thing that's happening in society, right? So we've got all of these different things, the Anthropocene, the economists talk about it. It's a mainstream problem, and we all know the big ones, climate change, water, but there are many, many, many others. And so the issue is, how do we take the advent of the advances of technology, what people were calling the third industrial revolution, the age of machines, we actually now refer to as the fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT, cloud computing. How do we take all the advances that happen so that I can talk to an agent in my house and play any piece of music, or I can log on to any laptop with my face, or I can use all sorts of inference engines, and we see it in business everywhere, but we don't see it yet on the planet. So this is what we come to work and we think about every single day. Now, when we think about technology and its linear advances, right, and I'll go through some of the stats on species in a second, we tend to think that the pace of innovation is the pace of innovation we have today. So when we look back, when I bought my first cell phone, this was what I bought. Anybody recognize these? I actually had a brick in the back of my car, which was basically the power pack and the transponder and basically the antenna for this. And my cell phone bill, my first month, was $500 for 1 month. And the cell phone itself was $1,500. And by the way, it didn't have a video camera, so if I wanted a really cool video camera, I could spend $1,300, right? And if I actually wanted to communicate with other people, kind of texting, I could have like a CB or something else, right? Now today, this is the new, hey, you can put your iPhone in water and it costs, still costs a couple $100, but actually if I go to a developing nation for about 25 to $50, I can get one of these, right? So that's the pace of innovation. It's not linear. So I look at and think, how do we actually change the pace of innovation on the stuff that I'm interested in? And Microsoft thinks about AI and the AI revolution. Now, we do this in energy, we do this in carbon. Andrew mentioned we're carbon neutral, which means we offset 100% of our carbon for all of our energy. We use as much energy as a small state. It's another conversation I'm happy to have with you, but we spend a ton of time and investment on that space. We talk about water. Less than 3% of the planet's water is fresh water, and less than 1% of that's available for human use. We need 40% more water than we have by the year 2030. But today I actually want to talk about, not food, but I want to talk about ecosystems. So this is just a food web and basically interrelated of species. We know almost nothing about the species on the planet of this Earth. We think there are several million species that we have yet to identify, and the way that we do it is very old-fashioned and not sustainable in terms of understanding the planet's health. So you may not know this, but today species extinction is 1,000 times the rate that you would naturally expect, and 100 times the amount that's sustainable for human existence on the planet. So just think, of course, we know about bees. If bees go extinct, what happens to our food supply? So there's this massive problem. 10 million species we need to catalog. We catalog about 17,000 of them a year. It's going to take us 500 years to complete. Anybody think we have 500 years to catalog all the species on the planet? Yeah. So 1% of all species go extinct per year or in the 10-year period, and we think that we're going to have 15% extinction within 50. I actually think these numbers are low if we don't change our behavior, and we've already seen it everywhere. So the speed that we're moving, the way I think about it, it's almost like a 14.4 baud modem that we had like in 1997. Right? We need to move at the speed of light. So how do we do this? And of course, it costs way too much money. So I'm just going to talk about one species real quickly. Birds, you can look through all of this stuff. But basically, if we want to protect all of the birds on the planet, the way we think about cataloging and protecting species today, one category of species, $75 billion. Okay, we got to change the rules. How do we take a bridge from where we are, the way we think about species, the way we think about the planet, and move to a different paradigm, leveraging artificial intelligence, and also mitigating the risks that are associated with it? Well, here's an interesting thing. We all know, right, facial recognition, you take a bunch of pictures, you put it up, and you identify a few, and your computer will go tell you, hey, that's your son, that's your daughter, that's your cousin, here they are. You can do searches online. I can log on to my Surface computer with my face. So we partnered with this group called Wildbook, and we said, well, what if you actually took pictures of all these animals that people uploaded into the web, and you applied it across those things? You could see exactly what species are. And then you could actually go to the next level and say to a computer, wait, that looks like a zebra, and I know from the GPS where it is, and I also know that that zebra has a unique fingerprint called its stripes. And so now all of a sudden we start to think about cataloging species in a very different way than it used to be before. You know, people track elephants today? They fly over with biplanes and binoculars. And they go, oh, I think that's a different elephant than we saw yesterday because its ears are different. Right? This is a modern way to do this, which is you're leveraging the technologies that we've built for other purposes, facial recognition and cameras, to do these kinds of things. In China, we actually built an application where anybody in China can take a picture of a plant and upload it to the web. It'll either identify it or say it's a previously unidentified species of plant. Somebody will go catalog it, identify it, and it builds on its own catalog. So a couple years ago, I was invited to go, this guy, Doug, who I know, wrote this amazing book around wolverines. I was invited to go track wolverines with him, and I told my kids, we're going to go to Glacier National Park, we're going to go track wolverines, and my kids were like, awesome. I'm like, no, not that wolverine. These wolverines are like, oh, they're so cute. I'm like, not really. Really vicious. In fact, there are stories of trappers who are carrying wolverines on their back that they thought were dead. They wake up, and so much for the trapper. So this is a wolverine trap. This is modern technology. This is how you track a wolverine today. You build this trap, you put massive rocks on the door because a wolverine can eat through that thing and blow it out in a couple hours. They're amazingly strong. And you put this thing and you walk around with what I used to think of as like a UHF antenna and headphones, like you're looking for, metal detectors, and you're listening for a signal for the wolverine. Okay, that's the way we used to do things in an analog kind of world. I'm going to tell you very quickly about this new paradigm, which says when we think about stuff today, and you think about cataloging insects, this is how you do it. And you think about camera traps, and you go, wow, this is modern technology. I can actually have a SIM card, and I can look at it. Well, I have two guys who are about 30 years old come to my office a couple of months ago. And they said, hey, we've built this trap that can actually listen for and use optical recognition and emits basic particles that attract mosquitoes. So a mosquito will fly into the trap, and they can then say, this mosquito feeds on certain kinds of things, and they were doing it for Zika. And they were saying, look, we know that these mosquitoes carry Zika, so we will trap them, and we'll understand what's happening with Zika. And it basically uses infrared cameras and listening and wing beat patterns to know which mosquitoes to trap and which mosquitoes to let go. They said, well, what if we did this for animals? I said, well, what are you guys talking about? And they said, well, think about a sensor. Like, we think about sensors as things in our phone, in our pocket, on a lamppost. What if we actually turn nature into a sensor? I'm like, huh. This is an amazing paradigm shift. So now all of a sudden I'm thinking back to the Wolverine where we're going out, we're building traps. Mosquitoes feed on Wolverines. Why can't we trap the mosquitoes who feed on the Wolverines, and now we'll be able to know how many Wolverines are in a different area, how many elephants, how many key deer in Florida. Any place where there is an endangered species, we can now actually turn the revolution of AI and inference engines and learning and DNA to actually track species. So I won't go through all the details, but basically here, think about looking at all known organisms within 3 hours. Remember that guy I showed a couple slides ago? He's in the field, he's looking. The way mosquito traps work today is you take a bag, you dump them on a table, you have a bunch of postdocs, and they sift through them. They go, I think that one would attack a Wolverine. I think this one would attack a Wolverine. What we do now with computer science is we know from the wing beat and the pattern whether or not to release that mosquito or to trap it, and then we can run it against a database with 99% accuracy. So this is sort of about the speed at which things happen. We've moved from months and years to get a half a dozen Wolverines to a world where within a very short period of time we can map an entire ecosystem. This is the pace of nonlinear change that I'm referring to when I talk about artificial intelligence applied to science and the technologies of the Earth and the Anthropocene. We then take the DNA, we splice it. Every single animal has a unique fingerprint, and we can also see what other species are in the market because we can see exactly the distribution and patterns of everything. So that's just a really quick overview. We're doing this in all sorts of different areas, but you're taking artificial intelligence and you're taking things that we've been doing for decades that take months and months and huge amounts of human capital, and you actually leverage artificial intelligence and the work that we're doing in computer science and apply it to a nature's problem. And so I think about, there's this big perception that that technology takes us away from nature, right? Kids play video games, they're inside, they don't go out. When we actually turn nature as an instrument back into a vehicle for us to understand nature, then technology actually reconnects us to nature in a way we've never been connected before. So I think about this in my world, but I actually thought about it in your world too, which is we lived in a resource-constrained world, and I say we empower every person and organization on the planet, to thrive in a resource-constrained world. But these two guys taught me a really important lesson when they came in and talked about how they could use mosquitoes as sensors, which is the one resource which is not scarce is human ingenuity. So if you take your human ingenuity and all the problems you guys have been talking about, like my brain's been racing for the last 2 days, and you think about what are we doing commercially with things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, how do I take the power of that and apply it to the problem set that I am passionate about? For me, that's in the environment. For you guys, it is the future of our country and beyond in terms of our political discourse. So I hope, at least with a little bit of insight that you've been able to give me, and hopefully that I can give you, you can start to think about these things in breakthrough ways that will change the speed and pace of which we all evolve. Thank you.